All right, great. Okay, everybody, welcome to the October 2025 meeting of oh, there's Irving. Great. Super. Okay, I'll start that again. So welcome to the October 2025 meeting of the PRC. We have a couple of regrets for today's meeting. We have a regret from Howard and a regret from Rob. And Rob was good enough to send his synopsis for the Public Safety Committee, which I'll read on his behalf when we get to that part of the meeting. And we actually have somebody new joining us, and that's Meg. I certainly am glad to have her join us. Meg, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself so everybody knows who you are?
Sure. So I am a psychology professor at St. Mary's University in Halifax. And I recently joined the board for the Nova Scotia Criminal Justice Association, and my specialty at St. Mary's is forensic psychology. So before joining St. Mary's, I worked for Correctional Service Canada for 5 years, and now I'm teaching forensic psychology, doing research in forensic psychology.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meg, are you doing any casework?
Not a lot. I'd be happy to, but no, not a lot.
Because as a forensic psychologist out of St. Mary's, there's a criminology department there that you're familiar with. You guys could do some parole representation as parole assistants, and as well as propose alternative measures in the superior courts.
That would be wonderful. Yes, we could. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how to go about that. Yes.
Well, you're talking to an old hand. Give me a buzz.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Super. Yep. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Meg. All right, guys. Next item of business, we need an approval of the agenda as circulated. So can I have a mover and a seconder? Michelle moves, Matthew seconds. All those in favor? Carried. Great. Thanks very much, guys. Okay, news and announcements. I don't have anything from the news per se. We'll get to that, I would think, when we talk about our committee work, because some of it's dealing with that. Unless anybody wants to bring up, for the purposes of our meeting, anything in the news in the last meeting for us since the last time we met. Anything anybody wants to talk about off the top? Matthew, come on. Oh, it's Rick.
Well,
Dick.
I was going to say something about white collar crime, but I think it's misleading. The article in the Globe and Mail says that suddenly prosecutions are on an uptick in white collar crime. That has not been my experience, but hey, why consult a criminologist?
Okay. All right. Thank you. Dick.
Yeah, it's not particularly news, but maybe later in the meeting we can talk a little more about it. I just came out of a meeting about 15 minutes ago with the Minister of Justice senior advisor, a guy named Keith Torrey. Catherine Latimer was there as well, and we had about an hour with him talking about bail reform. So maybe I can bring that up later, maybe under Justice and Human Rights Committee business, or we can get into it right now, whatever you'd like.
Well, actually, I just want to let you know. Well, the timing is good, Dick. Thank you, because apart from news, the next item is business arising, which is our parliamentary committees, and the first committee is the Commons, Justice, and Human Rights. That's Sarah's committee. Let's get Sarah to give her report first, and then we'll come back to you, Dick, because I'm sure it's going to tie into what she has to say.
Yeah, it honestly probably will. And you'll probably be able to fill in some gaps. So this is my first time kind of summarizing the justice report. So bear with me. I don't know if I've made it succinct enough or if I've added too much information, but here we go. So we've had 4 meetings so far since everything's been up and running in session since we've met last. So a lot of those meetings, about 3 of them, have been regarding the youth justice bail reform, and kind of everything pertaining to that. So there's been widespread agreement that post-release monitoring should be improved. And then there was also a really big focus on at-risk youth who are vulnerable to exploitation and being brought into gangs and stuff like that. There's calls for harsher penalties and stricter bail rules, especially with violent repeat offenders charged with crimes such as first-degree murder. And in addition, they wanted to increase have harsher penalties as well for youth offenders. At the same time, several members emphasized the need for rehabilitation programs. There was an emphasis on that it's quite rare in provincial systems, and urged the federal government to it needs to come from a federal level across all of Canada. A call for community-based reintegration and mental health supports. There was a kind of talk about creating a national summit to kind of talk about everything every year and gain more information that way. There was an emphasized shift in focus towards victims rather than the perpetrators. MP Clayton specifically was criticizing that he saw excessive sympathy for repeat violent offenders and not enough focus on the victims themselves. So that was kind of the first three meetings. In the third meeting, there was, I think it was Larry Brock. Now I'm not sure. I think it is Larry Brock, who basically brought forward Bill C9 and wanted to discuss that as well. So currently they're still researching and talking about the bail reform, but they're also talking about Bill C9, and there's research and content about that for the next, I think, 10 meetings. So with Bill C9, that's the Combating Hate Act. And so that was the entire focus of the very last session that they just had. Bill C9 focuses on willful promotion of hate through symbolisms and expressions of hate speech and acts of hate as well. A big focus there was kind of changing the language around hate, the definition of hate, what that means. There was a lot of debate around that specifically because there's discussion that the change that they've made in the amendment to Bill C9 is diluting the meaning around it, because they've gotten rid of some of the extreme language that's in the original bill, around the definition of hate. And so basically what they've said is that, you're diluting the bill. People aren't going to take it as seriously anymore. But they haven't diluted it. They've changed the wording. The defense is that they've changed the wording to make it easier to prosecute, easier for law enforcement officers to have a clearer definition of what hate is and what a hate crime would be. There's also concerns about future hate crimes not being covered by this new amendment, basically like online hate speech or online hate symbolism being created, probably using AI, not AI. But basically, there's a concern that the new amendment to this bill is not going to stay current and apply to future hate speech issues that might come up. And then I think another issue that they kind of brought up was the how this isn't going to turn into something that's going on in the UK, where there's, police officers. I mean, an example that was brought up a lot was police officers showing up at youth homes in the middle of the night because somebody made a Twitter post that included hate speech, because it's infringing on free speech. There's a lot of conversation and debate about how free speech doesn't turn into being criminalized, if that makes sense. And then they're also proposing that there's now the Attorney General doesn't need to give consent to, this is what they're proposing, that the Attorney General doesn't need to give consent to prosecute a hate crime or a hate speech crime now. The goal of that is to make it easier to prosecute, because there's a call for actually being able to charge people for hate crimes. There's apparently just a really serious lacking of charging, even though they're happening. And so that's a way of doing that, but it's been criticized because it's not they think that it's basically going to get out of hand. You know, if you're not getting the Attorney General to sign off on these things and give consent, you're going to be charging everybody for anything. So I feel like that was most of what was discussed at the last meeting. And then basically they just discussed kind of moving forward, how many meetings are they going to be putting towards both of these topics. And then there's a budget that's been approved for $69,000 to put towards the bail reform topic and researching that further. So that's kind of my report. Sorry if it's a little disjointed. I think any other things that didn't come or that came up that were not related to those two topics were gun violence. And then there was a lot of kind of criticism of the gun buyback program, and people saying that it's not going to be effective, it's not going to be useful. So they kind of brought that up several times early on, but it was pushed to the side because it wasn't the topic at hand. And I think that was really the only thing that came up a lot that was really not related to the topics.
Okay, thanks, sir. Any questions for Sarah? Okay, thanks, sir. All right, Dick, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I'll mention first of all, on the committee that Sarah just talked about, Catherine Latimer, as I mentioned to you, Miles, was appearing, quite to my surprise and a lot of people's surprises. This Justice and Human Rights Committee was doing a study of bail reform, and she, along with others, made presentations. But I should mention that I think in that session, as well as today's meeting that I had with the minister's senior advisor, she did mention CCJA and other groups that had received my paper and were considering it, and just kind of alerting this Keith Rohde, the senior advisor, that this wasn't just John Howard Society, but that other groups had, she said, have similar views, and they may in fact be supporting this paper that I prepared. So that was at the meeting, and then Keith at the committee meeting, and then the senior advisor Keith Rohde asked. He's read the paper, and he and another lawyer. He's a criminal defense lawyer, by the way, so he kind of knows the field. Asked Catherine and me to attend a meeting today, which I just came out of 20 minutes ago, and I think basically they wanted me to go through the paper, so I did, and I think in terms of a bottom line or a conclusion is that they liked the paper. They were they were sympathetic to what was being said, but I had no indication that they would consider these kinds of major revisions at this point. And Catherine and I kind of acknowledged that at the beginning anyway. But I then went on to say, near the end, we were wrapping up, and I said, does this committee of Justice and Human Rights in the House, is that the beginning of the second part of a two-step process? You're going to come in with some immediate reforms, like more reverse onus provisions, just to satisfy the immediate political problem. And then does this committee represent the beginning of a more thorough review? And he didn't think so. He was open. He said he's been hearing a lot about the need for major reform, but I didn't get any inclination from him that this major review was beginning in the short term. But he's not ruling it out. But anyway, he did. He was very very accommodating. Maybe he is to everyone, but it was a half-hour meeting, and we ended up going over an hour. So there was a lot of discussion. So that I just wanted to report that, and that I guess I guess that's all for now. Although I would think in this session we're having right now, I don't know if you've distributed the paper anywhere, Miles, but others at the table here today might be interested in seeing that paper.
Yeah, no, we haven't yet, Dick, because I wanted to hear from you. Irving and I have seen it. And here's the thing, and this is kind of this is the fact that somebody in justice is already talking about this and calling witnesses, or whatever the process is undergoing is a bit of a strange thing for me, because the way this usually works is that there's going to be a government bill introduced in Parliament that deals with bail reform. The Prime Minister indicated that would have come by now. Actually, he indicated it would have come last month. But having said that, so the bill's introduced C12 or wherever they are in the order of bills this session. And then it would have had first reading and then second reading. And at second reading, it would have gone to committee. And it would have gone to committee for basically to call witnesses to discuss it. Right. And none of that's happened yet. This is, so for some reason or other, the Justice Committee's already met to deal with this issue and have somebody like Catherine Latimer there from GSH. So, we're still waiting for, the bill to be introduced, and once it's introduced, to have first and second reading, and then they'll start calling witnesses again. So I'm a little confused as to what the real purpose of having hearings or discussions with yourself and Catherine, at this stage of the game is, when a bill hasn't yet come before Parliament. I mean, it is confusing to my small mind. So I just don't know how this is being handled.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was confusing to me too, because I agree with you that you would think it would be at second reading that we would make submissions and that sort of thing. That's why I asked the senior advisor if this was the beginning of a major study, not so much focused on a bill, but a Senate study, or I mean a House study on bail generally. But he didn't. So I'm as confused as you are about that point. I should note that to the extent the paper matters at all, that the paper has now been submitted and I believe distributed to all members of that committee. So it's kind of in the work somewhere.
Well,
But that,
and the reason I gave all that preamble was I was expecting that, certainly it's a great paper. I think it should be distributed as widely as possible. But my thinking was, of course, is that, that when the bill is introduced regarding bail reform, we'd strike our own internal committee and prepare a brief that we'd then forward to the board for approval. Then that would go then to Parliament and the ministers. And a great part of the substance of our brief would be your paper to a great degree, because it's just that well written. So that was the process I had in the back of my mind. So this recent activity in the Justice Committee is a little bit strange. But with your permission, I have absolutely no qualms in distributing your paper to the members of the PRC and more broadly, because it's excellent, and the more people who read it, the better they'll understand the issue. So if you're good with that, Dick, then I'll certainly do that.
oh yes, thank you for your comments. Thank you.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
no,
sure. I think it's good to get it out there and maybe get some support whenever we can appear before a committee and have it taken seriously.
Okay.
Dick, can I ask you a question? I'm not sure I followed exactly what you're saying, but I think you're indicating that the impression you got from the minister's staff was that they would not be reconsidering any changes. Yet I'm reading that there's some political negotiations happening behind closed doors, and that is why they haven't released anything yet. And they may be, I'm just guessing, really, quite frankly, I'm speculating. They may be trying to even toughen it up.
Yeah, I don't, on that, Irving, I guess my focus was major reform, like an overhaul, a real rethinking. We didn't get into any maybe current discussions about what I would call probably relatively less major revisions or amendments to the Act.
Well, from my perspective, and I've read the paper, I mean, a major overhaul, as you're suggesting, I don't necessarily agree with you and I've talked about this. I don't agree with some of the wording that is in your paper, but I certainly agree with the intent. I agree with things like eliminating the tertiary ground as a reason for denying bail. It's a terrible never had any justification for being enacted in the first place. So, anyway, those kind of things are really important. I would like to think that the Justice Committee, when it's struck to deal with this, once a bill is introduced, that they would think of things like, this is the opportunity for them to do some major overhauls, once it's going to be addressed again, as opposed to, for instance, the Trudeau government, doing a patch-up job kind of thing, the same kind of thing year and a half ago, because of the exact same circumstances. What happens is, if somebody commits a crime and they're out on bail, there's a hue and cry for, we don't let anybody ever out again on bail. That's kind of the thing. We'll see that when we talk briefly about the Tories' private members bill. The Jail Not Bail Act is a private members bill, but we'll see that. Sarah, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm wondering if someone can clarify for me why, because I know there's a study being done right now, on bail reform and that whole topic of conversation. Why is this paper not something that we could submit at this point? Do we have to wait for a certain point to be able to have an input?
Well, two things. Firstly, I think according to Dick, the paper has been submitted to the current group of people who are reviewing this issue. So I think they do have it in their hands. What we would do is, and again, we would do this in concert with preparing a brief after the bill is introduced in the Commons, is we'd certainly use it, we could append it, or however we were going to approach it, in preparing our brief. So, that's what we do, is we prepare briefs. Essentially, that's the strength of the CCGA and the PRC that supports it. So, clearly, what a lot of what Dick has to say would be replicated in our brief, supportive, of what he has to say. Again, briefs that come forward aren't always adopted whole as by the board, but we prepare it. The board has a chance to look at it, give us their comments on it, and what have you. So, this is a long-winded way of saying that, yes, I understand that somebody in Justice already has the paper, and we'd use it ourselves to prepare a brief. So I think that
No.
is that fair for how your paper's being circulated?
You're asking me?
Yeah, is your paper in the hands of Justice at this point?
It's definitely in the hands of the Justice Minister's office, and I believe when Catherine appeared before the Justice and Human Rights Committee, she mentioned the paper, mentioned my name, and submitted it. So whether it's getting wide distribution, I don't know yet. I know there was a question about translation that she brought up with me later. She had heard from the clerk, and they thought it was too long to translate. It's 54 pages long. So I'm just completing a 5-page executive summary. So that might help too. But yeah, I think what you're saying makes sense, Miles. The other thing I wanted to say is our original thinking was that this would be kind of maybe a joint presentation or whatever between John Howard and CCJA. And I think it was quite out of the blue. Catherine got this call to appear, and it was the next morning she had to appear. So she just went in. But I think she's very committed to working with other groups like CCJA, Canadian Civil Liberties Association, the NAACJ. I think the Church Council might be in there. So I just wanted to reiterate that's still, I think she's hoping that it doesn't have to be my paper so much, but there'll be a kind of a widespread common approach or thinking on bail reform that might have some impact if we ever get a chance to. I guess it's second reading would be the time.
All right. Good. Thanks, Dick. Anybody else have anything to say about this? Clearly something that we'll get into as time goes on. Next is any other things for Sarah and the Justice Committee? Okay, good. All right, thank you, guys. All right, the next parliamentary committee is the Public Safety, National Security, and Rob has sent me his brief on that, so I'll just read it into the record. So SECU met 5 times during September and October. The subject of the first meeting was committee business, laying out the committee's upcoming work. 2 meetings were held on the topic of Canada-US border management, one of the growing problems of car thefts in Canada, and one on the mandate priorities of the Minister of Public Safety. So the meeting on September the 18th, the topic of discussion was committee business. The committee agreed to undertake work in the following 4 areas: to undertake a study into Canada-US border management with a minimum of 5 meetings, starting with officials from the Department of Public Security, CBSA, which is Canada Border Services, and the RCMP, and to submit recommendations to the House. To invite the Departments of Public Security, RCMP, and the CBSA to do a 1-hour update to the committee on the National Action Plan to combat auto theft. 3, to undertake a study into Canada's ability to deport foreign nationals with criminal records, dedicate no fewer than 6 meetings, report findings to the House, and request a government response. And lastly, to undertake a study on the role of the CBSA in supporting maritime trade in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence corridor, present a report to the House, and request a government response. So that was the content of the September 18th meeting. On September the 23rd, the topic of discussion was Canada-US border management. Representatives appeared from the Departments of Public Safety, CBSA, RCMP, and the Privy Council Office. No evidence was made available. On September the 25th, the topic of discussion was the growing problem of car thefts in Canada. Representatives appeared from the Departments of Public Safety, CBSA, RCMP, and the Privy Council Office. To counteract the exportation of stolen vehicles, CBSA hired 66 new staff, but clarified that does not count towards the 1,000 expected hires, as the CBSA is developing plans to hire the latter. The RCMP representative was not able to comment on the status of the RCMP's expected hires. The CBSA commented that 2,300 vehicles were intercepted last year, and they are on track to intercept 1,500 this year. It is estimated that 372,000 cloned VINs exist in Canada, and 127,000 of them are registered in Ontario. Okay, and October the 7th, we had the topic of Canada, again, US border management. Representatives appeared from Ancipator Radar Technologies, Customs and Immigration Union, Future Borders Coalition, and the Bureau. No evidence was made available. And their last meeting on October the 9th, the topic of discussion was the mandate and priorities of the Minister of Public Safety. The Minister of Public Safety, the Honorable Gary, and I can't for the life of me pronounce his name, I apologize, appeared along with the CBSA President, CSIS Director, CSC Commissioner, Department of Public Safety Deputy Minister, PBC Chair, and the RCMP Commissioner, and no evidence was available. Okay, so that's thanks to Rob. Any questions? Yes.
Miles, could you send that to me, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
The abstract.
Yep.
I'd appreciate it. I have a client I'm trying to deport out of the country, and it might help a little.
Absolutely no problem. Anything else? Okay, that moves us to the next parliamentary committee, was the Senate Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs, and that takes us to Brendan.
Yeah. Hi, Miles. Sorry for being late. Was just having some tech difficulties, but happy to be able to get on. So the Standing Senate Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs, they've met 6 times since September, between today and September. I'm not going to spend too much time on the bills. There's 2 bills that were discussed, both of which are revived from the previous Parliament. The first one is currently labeled as S-228, so it's an act to amend the criminal code, sterilization procedures, so private members bill, basically criminalizing non-consensual sterilization procedures. The impetus there is specifically for Indigenous women. Of course, it applies to anybody in Canada. Again, I think I discussed this a fair bit last year. It actually made it to the committee stage in the House of Commons in the last Parliament. So it went through pretty quick at committee. No real amendments were made. The bill is quite simple. It's pared down significantly from its previous iterations that may have been overly broad. So it's basically a couple lines, takes out issues that could have accidentally criminalized doctors in some cases. So it's a slimmed down version of previous iterations of the bill. So I think it's passed through 3rd reading or will be proceeding to 3rd reading shortly. If I'm not mistaken. Sorry, let me just look for my notes. Yeah, sorry. It has proceeded through third reading in the Senate. It's awaiting first reading in the House of Commons. Um, there's only one of the six meetings was on S228. There have been five other meetings, though, on Bill S209, which is an act to restrict young persons' online access to pornographic material. Again, it's another bill that um, died on the order paper in the last Parliament. Again, that one got to, it began in the Senate as well and got to second reading in the House of Commons. There have been a number of people that have testified before the committee on this bill. Many government organizations, government departments. There's civil liberties groups have. So you have the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, the Canadian Bar Association. A lot of the Office of the Privacy Commissioner has also testified. So a lot of the same people as in the previous Parliament. More or less, the issues are privacy versus safety. So protect the children versus what if there are privacy concerns. One really interesting witness that I'll just bring up because I thought it was a bit of a unique and a unique perspective. It was a gentleman from the UK who has, and the UK does have age verification on pornographic websites for adults, and has basically said it's worked well. And his position, more or less, is that all the privacy concerns about privacy breaches, etc., about kids getting around age verification technology, has not actually surfaced in the last couple years. Yeah, so I thought that was a bit of a unique perspective, again, just because it's some real world experience. Um, I'll leave it there. I can summarize maybe once the arguments are maybe finished, once we get to clause by clause. I think the idea is we're going to get to clause by clause in the next couple meetings on this bill. I can give a better idea of where everybody stands. But I foresee this bill passing largely as it is, given that it already went through Parliament previously. So, yeah.
Thanks, Brendan. Any questions or comments for Brendan? Okay, super. And that brings us lastly to the Senate Committee on Human Rights, and that would be Dick.
Yes, there have been a few meetings, or two or three meetings, but nothing of substance so far. They're dealing with administrative matters, including deciding an agenda for their work. So they haven't even decided on substantive topics yet. So that's all that I can report on.
Okay, thanks, Dick. Appreciate it. Okay, guys, moving on. So the other issues are out of business arising. The next one, and I'm not going to go through the waiting briefs. They're there for everybody to know what's on the agenda. But the next item is the Law Commission of Ontario and AI, and that is what Sarah is looking into. Sarah, you have any updates for us?
Yeah, the update, I guess, since we talked last, is that Michelle and I have started to actually put together a position paper. So I don't know if Michelle wants to include more information on that, but we're kind of in the beginning stages where we have taken a look at a lot of the Law Commission of Ontario. We've looked at that paper. We've kind of put together something else that includes some of those topics, but some topics that we brought forward as well. And yeah, we're just getting started on that. I don't know how long until that'll be finished, but I don't know, Michelle, if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I think that maybe at our next meeting we'll have a good idea as to what we're working on there with more detail. But obviously, this is not going to be a brief in the sense that the briefs that are presented by the other members of the committee there. So, like Sarah saying, it's a position paper. It's maybe even just a discussion paper. So anyway, we'll tell you more about it at the next meeting. But it's going. We've got all our plan. It's well laid out, so we're moving on there pretty good.
Super. I'll record that on the agenda, so we'll come back to that at the next meeting. Good. Thanks, guys. Next order of business arising, the Canadian criminal justice issues on the position papers. Irving has been handling all of that, and we received the latest update from Dick this morning on youth justice. So, Irving, do you have anything to add?
Well, I haven't had a chance to actually read it, but we've posted the updated. The first 8 have been updated, and they've been, pardon me, posted on our website. And I guess we'll do the same with number 9, which is the last one from Dick. Thank you very much.
Super. Thanks very much, guys. Uh, okay, next issue is Miscarriage of Justice Review Commission. So I can tell you, and this is good news, is that my contact, the MP that I have a relationship with, who actually he was in the Justice Committee, he's now been moved to another committee, but he was told by Minister Fraser that in fact everything is in the works to basically post the positions with the Privy Council for commissioners to apply to be in the commission to take place before Christmas. Right, and then I imagine that the review process will be a couple of months long. So I would think realistically, before the spring of 2026, we should have a commission in place and become operational, which is great. That's what we've all been waiting for. Yes, Matthew.
Hey, Miles, maybe you can help me because you're such an expert on this topic. Do the commissioners that are appointed have to move to Winnipeg?
Oh, no. Well, that's a good question. There's no regs that say anything about that, although the legislation is clear that the chair is going to be there. The chair is full-time and in Winnipeg. There's 5 to 8 other commissioners that are potentially going to be appointed that we don't know, and they could be either full-time or part-time, so we don't know. I would think that any part-time commissioners would be remote across the country. There's no indication that they would move to Winnipeg. If you're a full-time commissioner, it's basically up to the Privy Council when they make their appointments, whether they're going to have to move to be in Winnipeg or not. Right? There's nothing there's nothing to say that you can be a full-time commissioner and necessarily not be in Winnipeg. You could do it from Halifax for that matter, as long as you have the internet. But that hasn't been resolved. So we're waiting. That'll be all part of I would think the call from the Privy Council looking for positions to be filled. They'll indicate in the postings whether moving to Winnipeg is one of the criteria. But clearly the one person who has to be there is the head of the commission, who will be full time.
Thank you, Miles.
Sure, my pleasure. All right, that's it. That's all I have for the MJRC. And the other issue that is still ongoing is our relationship with the Uniform Law Conference of Canada. As everybody knows, we've been dealing with this now for a couple of years on trying to get all human rights codes across the country, provinces, territories, and the federal code harmonized so that basically criminal convictions would be a ground of discrimination in their human rights codes with respect to employment, unless the employment deals specifically with the record at hand, and with respect to housing. And again, there would be exceptions to that. Things like, if somebody is on a sexual offender registry, that wouldn't get a pass for a housing consideration, obviously. So that's where we are with that. So I put into the agenda the last thing that I received from them. I'll just read it into the record. So this comes from the ULCC. They said, "Thank you for your patience. We believe we have the information we need to bring your proposal to our advisory committee for project development and management for consideration. It will be added to the agenda for a meeting in the next few months. This is the first step for approval of a new working group. Once your proposal has been accepted at ACDPM, which is the group with the committee, I will be able to update you about any next steps." So there we go. I think it's positive. All my conversations with them have been positive. They like the proposal. They think it's worthy of their efforts. And I've given them a name of human rights activists and experts across the country who would be good fits for the committee. So I did all that for them. So they're going to take that to whoever makes those decisions, and we'll hear back, within, I would think, the next 1 to 2 months. Any questions? Okay. All right. So that is it for all of our business arising and committee work. That brings us to bills under consideration. Actually, it's since our last meeting. The bills have been, the introduction of bills, public and private, have been busy. So we'll go to the House of Commons government bills. Bill C2, we talked about it at our last meeting. That's the bill regarding the economy and Carney addressing Trump kind of thing. So we've talked about that. Bill C9, which it was Sarah who mentioned Bill C9 has been introduced. It's an act to amend the criminal code for hate propaganda, hate crime, and what have you. Sarah gave us a bit of a synopsis on it. So that had its first reading on September the 19th. So we'll let it go forward, and we'll see if it hits second reading for our next meeting and then into committee. We also have Bill C12, an act respecting certain measures relating to the security of Canada's borders and the integrity of the Canadian immigration system. And Part 3 of that bill amends the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act to confirm that the Governor and Council may, on the recommendation of the Minister of Public Safety, make regulations exempting members of law enforcement from the application of any provision of the criminal code that creates drug-related inchoate offenses when they are undertaking lawful investigations. So we have that, and it was first reading on October the 8th. So those are the current public bills. Yes, Matthew.
Miles, could you explain to this non-lawyer who did not go to law school what a drug-related inchoate offense is?
Inchoate is a phrase used for preparatory work. So I mean, it's used in various contexts, but that's always been my take on it. It's things that are being done in preparation for doing something else. So I don't know if that makes sense in the context of this bill, but there's no other explanations given in the bill itself as to why that's referenced there. So unfortunately, that's about the best I can do.
So does this give law enforcement, i.e. undercover agents and the law enforcement agents, the ability to commit drug related offenses as part of their investigation?
I don't know. And it doesn't say anything about undercover either, but it does seem to be giving a pass to police investigations dealing with drug-related crimes.
A lot of undercover folks are committing crimes along with their targets.
Yeah, and I think that this is I only put one part of the bill. This is a very long bill. Has several parts. I just put part 3 in here because it deals with justice issues, but it's a much broader bill. So if you want to take a look at it, it's on Legislative Information, the website. But I think you're probably right. I think it's clearly giving the police doing an investigation in a drug-related crime a pass for doing something. So and then you're absolutely right. I mean, the undercover cops, commit crime all the time. It's part of the gig. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. That's it for the public bills. So I don't propose to go through all the private member bills. I did that. I've done that previously, but I think, first off, there's now a lot of them. But private member bills don't go anywhere in real terms until they basically get through the readings, and they may or may not be introduced in the House for first reading. So any private members bills, unless somebody wants to specifically talk about any of them, and I've included them all in the agenda, unless anybody thinks a private member's bill is worthy of discussion before it actually makes it into the House for first reading as a government bill, then I don't propose to go through them unless there's something that jumps out. In this case, and then I've got 20 bills here that have been introduced that are justice related private member bills, but Bill C-24, an act to amend the Criminal Code and the Department of Justice Act, that's the Jail Not Bail Act. So that's the conservative introduction of a private member's bill for legislation they'd like to see put in place. And this is their approach to amending the provision of bail in Canada. Right. And if you look at it, and I've included all of the salient sections of it as to what they're trying to do, it's everything. Right. It makes bail exceptionally difficult in a plethora of more situations where they don't have reversal illnesses at this point, and they don't have they still have the benefit of the presumption of innocence. This removes the presumption of innocence in a great number of circumstances in a bail setting. So it's there. There's subclauses A to K in the intro to the bill that basically sets out all the various situations where the Conservative government would like to see bail denied, essentially. So it's there to read. Yes, Matthew.
So there was a reason why a number of progressives decided to vote for the Carney leadership, because we felt that if Poilievre and the Conservatives got in to power as the prime minister, we would begin seeing exactly this kind of legislation, and which would be forcing a building campaign, not just at the provincial level, but we would have a building campaign at the federal level as well.
And we mentioned this too before the election. I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Matthew. If it had been a conservative government, and Poilievre, is not Harper light. He's now Harper augmented. So it's tough on crime. And we as the PRC, we would have been very, very busy. There's no question about that. But having said that, this kind of thing, and it's filled with hyperbole, and legislation shouldn't, but it is. It's the kind of thing we'd be facing all the time. And Poilievre, is trying to paint Carney into a corner. Basically saying that crime is out of control. Canada is in a hellhole of crime, and Carney should be legislating us out of it. That's just Poilievre's position, and there's votes for that. So, fortunately or not, unfortunately, we'll see how Carney responds. What he puts in the new Bail Reform Act will say a lot about his approach to criminal justice. We will see. But this issue just never goes away. Yeah, apart from incarcerating and keeping incarcerated everybody on remand forever, right? Sometimes somebody on remand or somebody on bail is going to commit a crime. And then it becomes a political issue. Any comments about this particular bill? Okay. So I don't have any comments about any further private members' bills in the Commons. The Senate, we have no government bills that relate to criminal justice. And we have a number of private member bills, but none of which are any of our concern at this point, at least not worthy of a lot of attention. We haven't seen Kim Pate introduce in her bill on the spent conviction regime, which she's introduced 4 or 5 times in the past. So I guess I presume she's still going to do it again. But it's a private member's bill in the Senate. I haven't seen it yet, so we'll keep an eye on it. And once it is introduced, I'll certainly bring it to everybody's attention. All right, guys, that's it. Any questions at all for the benefit of the group?
No, I want to thank you, Miles, for chairing the PRC and with a sense of humor at my bad jokes. And I guess we'll reconvene in November.
It will. And there's a question for everybody before we go. So the next meeting is on Remembrance Day. So would anybody like to move the meeting from noon back? And for those of you who want to attend ceremonies?
I don't have any particular position on that.
Anybody else?
You want to move it a bit later? Is that what you suggest?
I usually attend a ceremony, and so I would probably have a hard time getting back to my desk by noon when the ceremony is at 11. So
you want to do it 1 o'clock?
Sure. If 1 o'clock is okay I know that it cuts into people's lunchtime sometimes.
Yeah.
I want to do that as a rule, but I think Remembrance Day is a decent exception for that.
It might be a particularly interesting one. It's a week after the presentation of the budget.
Right.
Right. I think it's November 4th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So we may have some stuff to talk about that's real.
I agree. Matthew?
I'm trying to lose weight, so 12:30 works for me.
Okay. I can get back by 12:30, I hope. So so let's shoot for 12:30, same as today, and I'll let everybody know before the next meeting. And we'll take it from there. All right, guys, thank you very much. Pleasure seeing everybody again.
Thank you so much.
All right, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Miles.
Take care.